The observation deck of the Earth space station was quiet and cold. Large screens showed the endless black of space, filled with thousands of stars that looked like tiny diamonds scattered across dark cloth. Commander Teo stood near one of the windows, looking out at the vastness of everything. He had worked in space for 20 years, but the feeling of wonder never really left him. Today was different. Today, everything would change. The station had been monitoring a strange energy signature for 3 days. The scientists said it looked like a wormhole, but nobody really believed it. Wormholes were something from old science fiction stories, things that existed in books and movies, not in real life. But here it was, forming near Jupiter, creating a tear in the fabric of space itself. "Sir, we have something," called out Park Ji-ho from the communications station. His voice was excited but careful, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping animal. "There is a ship coming through the wormhole." Teo turned quickly. His heart began to beat faster. "Put it on screen," he said. The main display flickered and changed. What appeared made everyone in the room hold their breath. The ship was nothing like human vessels. It was smooth and white, shaped like a blade or a wing, with strange lights that moved across its surface in patterns that seemed almost alive. The ship was huge, easily 5 times larger than Earth's biggest warship. "They are hailing us," Ji-ho said. "Audio and video signal." "Put them through," Teo said. He tried to keep his voice calm and steady, even though his mind was racing with 1,000 thoughts. First contact. Actual first contact with alien life. The screen changed again. The alien appeared. And for a moment, nobody said anything. She was beautiful in a way that was different from human beauty. Her skin was pale blue, almost like ice. Her eyes were large and shaped differently from human eyes, but they held intelligence and something that looked like calm confidence. She wore clothes that seemed to be made of the same smooth material as her ship. "I am Ambassador Hei-wan of the Valerian Empire," she said. Her voice was smooth and controlled, with a slight accent that made the words sound formal and distant. "We have traveled from our home world to make contact with your civilization. I represent the Valerian Council of Leaders. We come to establish trade agreements and define territorial boundaries. This must be done through proper diplomatic protocols." Teo took a moment to study her face. She did not smile. There was no warmth in her expression, only the cool efficiency of someone completing a job. Behind her, he could see other Valerians, their faces equally blank and emotionless. The situation was tense. Protocol said that Teo should respond with careful, measured words. He should acknowledge the formal nature of this contact. He should follow the handbook that had been written by diplomats and military leaders over the past 100 years. Every word had been planned, every gesture controlled. But Teo had never been good at following plans. He looked at Ambassador Hei-wan for a few more seconds, then smiled. It was a genuine smile, not a formal expression, and he said something that made the entire room go silent. "Ambassador Hei-wan, before we talk about trade and territory, I just want to say that you are very beautiful. Your people must be extraordinary because they created you." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Hei-wan's eyes widened, just slightly. Her hand moved toward her chest. On the bridge behind her, Teo could see the other Valerians turning to look at her. Their faces showed confusion, as if they had seen something impossible. Hei-wan's lips moved upward. She was smiling. It was a small smile, just barely visible, but it was definitely a smile. "Commander Teo," she said slowly, "that was unexpected. Your people are indeed unlike what our records suggested." Back on the space station, people were talking over each other, expressing shock and confusion. General Ji-woo, who was watching from Earth on a secure video connection, started shouting protests about security and proper protocol. But Teo barely heard them. He was focused only on Ambassador Heywan's face, watching as her formal expression began to change. "I meant no disrespect," Teo continued, speaking in a natural, honest way. "I know this is formal business between our peoples. But I also think that before we talk about trade routes and boundaries, we should recognize that we are individuals, not just representatives of our civilizations. You are a person, not just an ambassador. I wanted to acknowledge that." Haiwan was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes studied Teo carefully, as if she was trying to understand something very complicated. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. It still had formality. But there was something else mixed in now. Something that sounded almost like curiosity. "Among my people," she said carefully, "personal observations about appearance are not considered acceptable in diplomatic communication. They are seen as a form of manipulation or weakness. But I am beginning to understand that your species operates differently. Your directness and emotional expression are not attempts at deception or advantage." "That is correct," Teo said. He felt calmer now, more confident. "We are taught to be honest. Sometimes that honesty can seem strange to others, but it is how we communicate. It is who we are." "This is most interesting," Haiwan said. Her eyes seemed brighter now, more engaged. "I would like to continue this conversation beyond the standard protocols. Perhaps we could arrange a private meeting, away from the formal channels. I believe your perspective might help me understand your civilization better." Teo nodded. "I would like that very much, Ambassador." On Earth, General Jiwoo was still protesting and demanding that Teo follow strict protocol. But Dr. Min Seo, the chief xenopsychologist, was leaning forward in her chair, watching the interaction with great interest. She was writing notes frantically, her eyes bright with excitement. This was the kind of moment that scientists dreamed about, a genuine connection forming between two completely different species. As the communication ended and Haiwan's ship moved to a designated orbit near the station, Teo realized that something important had just happened. He had broken every rule in the diplomatic handbook. He had ignored protocol and formal procedure. But in that moment, two people from two different worlds had looked at each other and seen something beyond politics and territorial claims. They had seen each other as individuals. And that single moment of honest human connection had opened a door that nobody really understood yet, a door that would lead to consequences nobody could predict, a door that would change the future of both their peoples forever. Teo looked out at the Valerian ship hanging in the darkness of space, its lights reflecting off the distant stars. He smiled to himself. Sometimes, he thought, being bold enough to be yourself is the most important thing you can do. The neutral station floated between the Valerian ship and Earth's orbital defenses, a safe place for both species to meet without either one feeling threatened. It was a sphere made of gray metal, with large observation windows and many small rooms for meetings. The station had been built to house diplomats from different Earth nations, but it had never been used for anything like this before. Teo walked through the corridors toward the meeting room, his heart beating faster with each step. He had barely slept in the past 2 days. Heywan's request for a private meeting kept repeating in his mind. He wondered what she wanted to talk about. He wondered if his actions during the first contact had caused problems for her. He wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The door to the meeting room slid open with a soft sound. Heywan was already there, standing near the large window that looked out at the stars. She was wearing different clothes now, lighter colored and less formal. She turned when she heard him enter. "Commander Teo," she said. Her voice sounded different in the quiet room, less formal than before. "I wanted to meet with you privately because I have many questions about your species. Questions that I cannot ask in official channels, questions that might be seen as weakness by my people." Teo felt something shift inside him. "You can ask me anything," he said. "I will answer honestly. Heywan moved to one of the chairs and sat down. She gestured for Teo to sit across from her. When he did, she was quiet for a long moment, as if she was choosing her words very carefully. "Your compliment during our first meeting," she began. "It was unusual. My entire life I have been taught that personal observations about appearance are forms of manipulation. When someone notices the way you look, it is considered an attempt to distract you from clear thinking. On my world, we evolved differently. We value logic and efficiency above all things. Emotion is considered a flaw, something to be controlled and hidden." "But you do have emotions," Teo said. It was not a question. He had seen it in her eyes, the small smile that had appeared for just a moment. "Yes," Haiwan admitted. "We have emotions. But we have learned to bury them so deep that sometimes we forget they are there. It is considered the mark of a civilized and intelligent being to show no feeling, to be completely logical in all situations." She paused and looked directly at Teo's face. "When you gave that compliment, something happened inside me, something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt, what is the word? Acknowledged. Not as an ambassador representing my people, but as an individual. As Haiwan, not as a function or a role." Teo leaned forward. "Is that a bad thing?" he asked gently. "I do not know yet," Haiwan said. "On my world it would be considered weakness, but I am beginning to understand that what you call emotion might not be weakness at all. It might be something different, something your species has learned to use as strength." She stood up and walked to the window. The stars reflected in her large eyes. "I have studied your history," she continued. "Humans have created beautiful art and music. You have written poetry and stories about love and passion and hope. These things seemed illogical to me, waste of resources, waste of time and energy. But now I am wondering if I have misunderstood something very important." "What is that?" Teo asked. "That maybe," Haiwan said slowly, "the things that connect us to each other are just as important as the things that make us survive. Maybe feeling something for another person is not a flaw. Maybe it is what makes us truly alive." Teo stood and walked to the window to stand beside her. They both looked out at the infinite darkness of space, at the stars that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. "On Earth," Teo said, "we believe that we are meant to connect with others. We believe that emotion is what makes us human. When we close ourselves off from feeling, we lose something essential. We become like machines, going through the motions of life, but not really living." "Tell me more," Heywan said. "Tell me about beauty. Humans seem to find beauty in many things. In appearance, yes, but also in sounds and in arrangements of colors and in movements. Why is this? Why do you spend so much time and effort creating and appreciating beautiful things?" Teo thought about this. How could he explain something that most humans never really questioned? Beauty was just something that existed, something that mattered without needing explanation. "Beauty reminds us that life has meaning beyond survival," he said finally. "When I see a beautiful sunset or hear beautiful music, I feel connected to something larger than myself. I feel like I am part of something important. It makes me feel alive in a way that eating and sleeping and working never could." Heywan was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was very quiet. "My superiors have ordered me to return to our world for evaluation. They believe that my interest in your culture is a form of contamination. They think that exposure to human emotion has affected my judgment and loyalty to our people." "Will you go?" Teo asked, though he already knew the answer would hurt him. "I do not know," Heywan said. She turned to look at Teo directly. "But I know that I do not want to leave this place yet. I want to understand more. I want to feel more. Even if my people consider it weakness, I want to know what it means to truly connect with another person." She reached out and took Teo's hand. Her skin was cool, almost cold to the touch, but her grip was firm and warm in its own way. "Will you teach me?" she asked. "Will you help me understand your world and your people and yourself?" Teo looked down at their joined hands, at this impossible moment where two different species, two different worlds, had found a way to touch each other that went beyond protocol and procedure. "Yes," he said simply, "I will teach you everything I can. And you will teach me about your people, about your world, about the way Valerians see things. And maybe together, we can help both our species understand that connection and emotion are not weaknesses. They are the most important things we have." HFY's lips moved upward in that small smile again, but this time it was larger, more genuine. And in that smile, Teo saw the beginning of something that neither of them could predict or control. Something that would have consequences far beyond this neutral station and the two people standing in it. Something that would reach across the stars and touch the very hearts of two civilizations. Back on Earth, the situation was becoming very complicated. The meetings between Teo and HFY had been reported to the government. Now everyone had opinions, and most of them were different from each other. Dr. Min Seo sat in the United Nations meeting room, preparing to present her findings. She was a small woman with intelligent eyes and a quick mind. She had studied the interactions between Teo and HFY very carefully. She had watched the videos, read the transcripts, and analyzed every word and gesture. What she had found fascinated her. "The interaction between Commander Teo and Ambassador HFY shows something remarkable," she began, standing in front of screens that displayed her research. "It demonstrates that emotional authenticity can bridge cultural gaps far better than formal protocol ever could. The Valerian species appears to be emotionally capable, but socially conditioned to suppress those emotions. Humans, on the other hand, are naturally expressive. This difference might actually be our greatest advantage in galactic relations." The room was filled with important people from many different countries. Some of them nodded in agreement. Others looked skeptical. But one person in particular looked very angry. General Jiwoo stood up from his seat. He was a tall man with a stern face and a military bearing. His uniform was covered with medals and decorations from his many years of service. "This is reckless," he said loudly. "We know nothing about these Valerians. Ambassador HFY could be collecting intelligence about our weaknesses. This human behavior of emotional expression that Dr. Min Seo is so impressed with might be exactly what makes us vulnerable. We should establish military protocols immediately. We should prepare for the possibility of conflict." "The evidence does not support that interpretation," Dr. Min Seo responded calmly. "Everything we have observed suggests that the Valerians are genuinely interested in peaceful contact and mutual exchange." "Of course they say that," General Jiwoo said. "That is what any intelligent enemy would say." The argument went back and forth for hours. By the end of the meeting, no clear decision had been made. But one thing was certain. There were people in Earth's government who supported Teo's approach, and there were people who opposed it violently. The question of how humanity should interact with this alien species had become political. Meanwhile, on the Valerian homeworld, something similar was happening. Counselor Quan was the leader of the conservative faction in the Valerian government. He was older, with a pale blue face that seemed to have been carved from stone. His eyes were cold and showed no emotion whatsoever. He was considered the ideal Valerian by many of the older leaders. He never felt anything. He never showed weakness. The message from Ambassador HFY had disturbed him deeply. "She requests an extension of her diplomatic mission," he said to the council members gathered in the great chamber where important decisions were made. "She claims she needs more time to understand human culture, but I believe something else is happening. I believe she is being influenced by these humans. I believe her judgment has been compromised." "What do you propose?" asked another counselor, a younger woman named Gina who sometimes questioned Quan's more extreme positions. I propose that we recall her immediately for psychological evaluation, Quan said. We must determine if she has been contaminated by human emotional influence. If she has, we must correct the problem before she infects others with these weaknesses. Contaminated? Gina said. She is having conversations with another civilization. That is her job as an ambassador. She is learning about their culture. She is doing more than that, Quan said coldly. She is adopting human attitudes. She is beginning to believe that emotion is acceptable. She is developing weakness. This cannot be allowed to continue. Our entire civilization is built on the principle that emotion leads to poor decisions. Emotion is our enemy. The council voted. The decision was made. Counselor Quan had the authority he needed. Ambassador Haiwan would be recalled to Valaria. She would submit to evaluation, and if she was found to be contaminated, she would be retrained. Back on the neutral station, Haiwan received the message while she was with Teo. They were looking at Earth music together, something called a symphony. The sounds had moved her deeply. She had never experienced anything like it before. When the message came through on her personal device, her face went pale. Her hand started to shake. What is wrong? Teo asked, seeing the change immediately. My government, Haiwan said slowly, is recalling me. They want me to return home for psychological evaluation. They believe I am contaminated by human influence. Teo felt anger rise in him, but he pushed it down. What will you do? He asked quietly. Haiwan looked at him for a long moment. He could see conflict in her eyes, see her struggling between duty to her people and something new that she had discovered here in this place with him. I do not know, she said. If I refuse, I will be branded as a traitor. My entire family will suffer. I will be cut off from everything I have ever known. And if you go? Teo asked. If I go, they will try to erase this, she said, gesturing around at the music display, at the books about human art and philosophy that they had been studying together. They will try to make me forget what I have learned. They will try to make me stop feeling. Teo stepped closer to her. He took her hand again, just like he had in their first private meeting. Then you must choose, he said. You must choose between the safety and certainty of your old life or the risk and uncertainty of embracing something new. It is the most difficult choice any person can make. Haiwan squeezed his hand. Her eyes glistened with moisture, something that should have been impossible for a Valerian. I am afraid, she said, and it was the first time Teo had heard her admit to any emotion so openly. So am I, Teo said. But sometimes being brave means doing what is right even when you are afraid. Haiwan closed her eyes. She stood very still for a moment. When she opened them again, Teo could see that she had made her decision. It would change everything. It would bring consequences that neither of them could predict, but it would also be the most honest choice she could make. The asteroid research station hung in space like a small gray moon. It was a place where scientists from different worlds came to study the rocks and minerals that floated in the darkness between planets. Nobody expected any important political events to happen there. It was peaceful and quiet and far away from the centers of power where governments made their decisions. This made it the perfect place for Haiwan to make her choice. Teo helped her move her personal things from the Valerian ship to a storage area on the asteroid station. They worked quietly, not speaking much, but understanding each other with the kind of silent communication that develops between people who have grown close. By the time they finished, there was no going back. Haiwan had abandoned her ship, her position, and her place in Valerian society. Back on Valaria, Counselor Quan received the news with anger. In the great chamber of the Valerian government, he stood and declared that Ambassador HFY was no longer a member of their civilization. She was a traitor. She had betrayed everything that Valerians stood for. She was to be considered an enemy of the state. On Earth, General Ji Woo saw the Valerian announcement and immediately demanded military action. But Dr. Min Seo went directly to Tayo and made a different proposal. She requested that HFY be given asylum with humanity. This would send a message to the galaxy that Earth valued freedom and individual choice. It would also help maintain peaceful relations with the Valerians by showing that humans respected their former ambassador enough to protect her. There was a vote in Earth's government. It was close. Many people still feared the Valerians and what they might do if Earth harbored one of their own. But Tayo spoke at the meeting. He spoke simply and honestly about what HFY meant. He spoke about how she had risked everything to reach out to a different civilization. He spoke about how her bravery deserved respect. The vote passed. HFY would be granted asylum. When she received the official notification, HFY wept. Tayo held her as her whole body shook with emotions she had been trained to suppress her entire life. These tears seemed to contain all the feelings she had locked away for decades. When she finally stopped, she looked up at Tayo with eyes that seemed clearer than before. "I had to do this," she said, "even knowing it would cost me everything." "You did not cost yourself everything," Tayo said gently. "You freed yourself. You gained the ability to choose your own path. That is worth any price." Dr. Min Seo came to the asteroid station a few days later. She brought with her materials and equipment for conducting interviews and studies. But she also brought something else. She brought genuine kindness and interest. She spent hours talking with HFY about her people, her childhood, her thoughts about the galaxy, and about life itself. "Tell me about your homeworld," Dr. Min Seo said, sitting across from HFY in the research facility. HFY described Valeria with words that slowly transformed as she spoke. At first, she described it with the cold logic she had been taught. It was a planet with specific coordinates and temperature ranges and atmospheric composition. But as she continued, something changed. She began to describe the ice formations that covered the continents, formations that caught the light of their sun in ways that created patterns of spectacular beauty. She described the great crystal cities that her people had built, structures that glowed with internal light during the long darkness of their winters. "Your world sounds beautiful," Dr. Min Seo said, and HFY realized that she had been describing beauty all along, even though she had been trained to deny that such a thing mattered. "It is," HFY admitted. "I have never allowed myself to think of it that way before. But yes, it is very beautiful." Dr. Min Seo leaned forward with excitement. "Do you see what is happening? You are learning to acknowledge what was always true. Your people have beauty in their world, in their art, in their very nature. You have been taught to ignore it, but it was never not there." She paused and then said something important. "What you are experiencing now is what we call awakening. You are waking up to parts of yourself and your culture that were always there, but hidden. And I believe this awakening is spreading among your people. We have received messages from young Valerians who are curious about your decision. Some of them are questioning the old ways of your civilization." HFY felt something shift inside her. She had thought that by leaving, she was abandoning her people. But perhaps she was not abandoning them. Perhaps she was showing them another way. Over the next few weeks, Tayo taught HFY about human art and music and literature. He showed her films and took her through virtual experiences of Earth environments that she would never have been able to see otherwise. But more importantly, he taught her about human feelings and how they connected to creativity and hope and love. HFY, in return, taught Tayo and Dr. Min Seo about the Valerian way of thinking. She showed them the beauty of their mathematical philosophy, how they could understand the universe through pure logic and reason. But she also showed them how this philosophy had become frozen, how her people had forgotten that logic and emotion were not enemies but partners in understanding the truth of existence. One evening, standing on the observation deck of the asteroid station, looking out at Earth and Valeria on opposite sides of the sky, HFY said something that made Teo understand how far she had come. "I was afraid of feeling," she said. "I thought that emotion meant weakness. I thought that if I allowed myself to care about anything, I would lose my ability to think clearly and make good decisions. But I was wrong. My feelings have made my thinking clearer, not less clear. When I feel the connection between us, I understand the universe better, not worse." Teo smiled and took her hand. "That is the human wisdom that we have learned over millions of years," he said. "The most important truths can only be understood with both the head and the heart." Behind them, Dr. Mincio was recording everything, not because she wanted to use it as political ammunition or proof of anything. She was recording it because this moment represented something essential to both their species. The moment when they both realized that they were incomplete alone and that only by joining together could they become whole. News travels fast across the galaxy, especially when it involves something unprecedented. HFY's decision to seek asylum with humans became the subject of discussion everywhere. Some species saw it as a betrayal. Others saw it as an act of incredible courage. But among the Valerian youth, something unexpected began to happen. Young Valerians started reaching out to their government, asking questions about why contact with human culture was so dangerous. Some asked permission to study human languages. Others wanted to know more about human art and music and philosophy. The government tried to suppress these questions, but suppression only made people more curious. Counselor Quan became increasingly frustrated. He saw the social order that had ruled Valaria for 10,000 years beginning to crack. It was all because of one woman who had dared to feel emotion openly. He demanded that the government issue stronger statements against what he called the human contamination. He wanted all contact with humans to be strictly limited, but he was no longer in complete control. A younger generation of Valerian leaders was rising. They had watched HFY's interviews on the data networks. They had read her writings about her experiences with human culture, and they were wondering if perhaps their civilization had been wrong about something very fundamental. On Earth, the situation was different. Teo's reputation had grown tremendously. He was no longer seen as the reckless commander who had broken protocol. He was seen as a visionary who had opened a new chapter in human history. He was promoted to High Ambassador of First Contact. This position gave him authority to make decisions about how humanity would interact with alien species. General Jiwoo, who had opposed him so strongly before, was retired. His philosophy of military caution was replaced by a new approach that valued peaceful exchange and cultural understanding. Some of the older generals were angry about this change, but most people supported it. The public loved the story of HFY and Teo. It gave them hope that the future could be different from what they feared. Dr. Min Seo established something called the Cultural Exchange Program. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Humans and Valerians would live together, study together, and learn from each other. Young people from both civilizations would spend time on each other's worlds. They would exchange knowledge and ideas and experiences. The first exchange program brought 10 young Valerians to Earth. HFY helped them adapt to gravity and temperature and all the small physical differences between the worlds. But more importantly, she helped them adapt emotionally. She taught them how to recognize their own feelings and how to express them without shame. One young Valerian woman named Dal Ree was particularly affected. She had been a student of mathematics on her homeworld, like most Valerians who were considered intellectually talented. But on Earth, she discovered music. She spent hours listening to human symphonies and human songs. She wept when she heard certain pieces. She felt joy and sadness and wonder all mixing together inside her in ways she had never experienced before. "How do you live like this?" she asked Haywan one day, sitting in a concert hall after a beautiful performance. "With all these feelings happening all the time?" "At first, it is very difficult," Haywan said. "Your whole training tells you that this is wrong, that these feelings will destroy your ability to think. But eventually, you realize that the opposite is true. These feelings give meaning to your thoughts. They make your life matter." Dalry had tears running down her face. "I want to bring this back to Valaria," she said. "I want my people to experience this." And she did. When the first exchange program ended and the young Valerians returned home, they carried with them the seeds of a cultural transformation. They started musical ensembles in their cities. They began writing poetry for the first time in thousands of years. They started asking their elders questions that the old Valerian leadership could not answer satisfactorily. Counselor Quan saw all of this happening, and he was filled with despair. His vision of a perfectly ordered, emotionless civilization was crumbling. He called for harsh punishments against those who were spreading human ideas. But fewer and fewer Valerians supported him now. His power was fading. Meanwhile, something beautiful was developing between humans and Valerians. It was not just about cultural exchange or scientific advancement. It was about genuine friendship and understanding developing between individuals from two completely different species. Young humans were learning Valerian mathematics and seeing the universe through Valerian eyes. Young Valerians were learning about human emotion and discovering parts of themselves they never knew existed. Teo and Haiwan became symbols of this new era. They were seen together constantly, working on new projects to strengthen the bonds between their two civilizations. But their relationship was more than symbolic. It was real. They genuinely cared for each other. They had built something together that transcended the boundaries between species. On Earth, they were celebrated. Haiwan received Earth citizenship. She was given an important position in the Human-Valerian Relations Council. But more importantly, she was accepted as an individual, as someone who belonged. On Valeria, things were changing more slowly. Some people still saw her as a traitor, but others, especially the young people, saw her as a pioneer. She had shown that there was another way to live. She had shown that emotion did not destroy logic. It completed it. 3 years after that first bold compliment in space, Teo stood on the observation deck of Earth's main space station looking out at the stars. Haiwan stood beside him. Between their worlds, ships traveled constantly now, carrying people and goods and knowledge and art. The galaxy was beginning to see humanity not as a primitive species with dangerous emotional impulses, but as a species with unique strengths. And the Valerians were being transformed, not destroyed, by contact with human culture. "Do you regret your decision?" Teo asked her. "Leaving everything behind?" Haiwan smiled, and it was a full smile now, not the small, uncertain smile of their first meetings. "No," she said simply. "I gained everything by losing what was holding me back. I became myself by refusing to be only what others told me to be." She squeezed his hand. "Your boldness gave me courage, and now that courage is spreading. It is changing our world." "Our world?" Teo asked gently. "Yes," Haiwan said, "not just Valaria or Earth, but the world we are building together. The world where emotion and logic walk hand in hand. The world where individuals matter. The world where beings from different civilizations can look at each other and see not threats or strangers, but possibilities for connection and growth." Around them, in the vast darkness of space, stars burned eternal and distant. But between those stars, networks of light were being created, ships traveling between worlds, signals carrying voices and music and ideas. the beginning of something new in the galaxy, the beginning of true understanding between different peoples.